As we head toward week 7 of the fantasy football season, who should you be targeting on waivers and which injuries do you need to know about? Let's find out. Welcome back, Endgame community. I'm Pierre, here to help you again with some waiver wire decisions and talk about the major injuries and guys you need to replace heading into week 7. Thankfully, this wasn't a real heavy injury week in terms of big name players for fantasy, but there is one that we need to talk about that might be kind of a headliner. So we've had a lot of questions lately about should you trade Marquise Brown with DeAndre Hopkins coming back? You know, this is time to sell Hollywood. And we said, no, he's been great. You got to hold him. Well, you know what? Now you didn't have to bench him because he might be missing some time. Unfortunately, he did get hurt and it was an ankle. So far, we've heard that x-rays are negative, but, you know, depending on severity, we'll find out soon. He could miss a game, maybe two. Who knows what it is? It doesn't sound like it's a serious injury, but you might have to be without him in week 7, thankfully. DeAndre Hopkins does come back, so at least we know where the targets are going. And then another big name, late in the Dolphins' latest loss, Jalen Waddle did appear to hurt his shoulder, his left shoulder. He was favoring as he came up, and he left briefly. Of course, this was not too long after he had fumbled on the way to allowing, Dolphins to get another loss. But that aside, look, Waddle had a monster game before then, even with Teddy B. So far, what we're hearing is that he should be fine. He kind of brushed it off afterwards. Nobody's saying this is anything serious, so he probably won't miss time. So that could be a bullet dodged, especially with Tua coming back in week 7. Waddle should firmly be on your starting lineup. And then Randall Cobb looked like he might be coming back to relevance in fantasy, but now he might be out for a while. We're hearing it looks like a high ankle sprain, and so we're looking at maybe 3 to 4 weeks for Cobb. Look, this Green Bay offense hasn't been great in general, and it's not like Cobb was a guy you were relying on, but his absence, it could have a domino effect. We could see Romeo Doubs, get more involved, and we did see a player who I'll talk about in a minute get a lot more involved all of a sudden. J.K. Dobbins, it was going to be tough sledding, coming back from multiple knee ligaments being torn, that injury, and he looked good right away, but now we're seeing, just like a lot of these players who maybe came back soon from injury, like James Robinson and Cam Akers from those Achilles, a lot of these guys, Sterling Shepard, re-injury or just not 100% effective in their return. And so Dobbins did leave the game early. His knee, they said, just kind of started feeling stiff and aching, bothering him. That's not good for a guy who, again, just missed the entire season with a knee injury. So we don't know what his status is, but obviously this is a concern, not just whether he plays or not, but whether he's even going to be effective. And that did lead to Kenyon Drake having a monster game kind of out of nowhere. Is he worth picking up? Well, I'll tell you that in a second too. All right, and then what about Cameron Brate? He missed a week with a concussion. Unfortunately, in this game, again left, but also was on a stretcher. It was a very serious thing, taken to the hospital. He has movement in his extremities, so good news, doesn't seem to be anything extremely serious, but guarantee he will not be playing next week, maybe for a while, who knows. That means the rookie Cade Otton becomes interesting again in fantasy, although that Tampa Bay offense also kind of has its own issues. So Otton is really just nothing more than a streamer for bye weeks. And then we saw a concussion, unfortunately, for rookie quarterback Kenny Pickett of the Pittsburgh Steelers, just as they were getting a win over Tampa, but he did leave early. Mitch Trubisky took over. Not sure how this is going to play out, but with concussions, especially with quarterbacks involved, this is something they'll take seriously. His status for next week could be up in the air. And then you might think, this doesn't matter for fantasy, but it's worth noting that PJ Walker of the Carolina Panthers did also leave with a neck injury. Baker Mayfield already missing multiple weeks. Sam Darnold's not back yet. So that means the Carolina Panthers, fresh off having fired their head coach, are now down to their 4th string quarterback. That's right, Jacob Eason. So this is just another friendly reminder. Maybe avoid anybody on the Panthers not named Christian McCaffrey. And finally, Deion Jackson, who was a great smash spot start in week 6, put up numbers, but he left early with a quad injury. The problem is that he might miss a week or two, and just as he's out, Jonathan Taylor is almost sure to come back next week, maybe Nyheim Hines too. So it was fun while it lasted, but it looks like Deion Jackson could probably be dropped. All right, let's get to the top waiver wire pickups heading into week 7. The first one might seem obvious, but you know what? A lot of people still have not picked up Brian Robinson if he's out there. We weren't sure what his workload would look like, how effective he would be. We got the answer on Thursday. He was clearly the lead back in terms of rushing, 17 carries, 60 yards, and a touchdown. That's not amazing, but look, it's pretty obvious he's the guy who's going to get the touches, not Antonio Gibson. The downside is that J.D. McKissic was clearly the passing down, third down back, and Gibson did work in as well. So it kind of looks like a messy three-headed committee on a bad team with a backup quarterback now. But look, running backs who are starting running backs are hard to come by. Robinson will have some touchdown upside, even if he's not going to have a very high floor in PPR. He's the starting running back. And look, with Carson Wentz out, they might lean on the running game more. I think Robinson just has enough juice that he is worth adding pretty much wherever he's available. Now back to that J.K. Dobbins injury. That led the way for Kenyon Drake to kind of reemerge. And he had himself a day, 111 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Where did that come from? Nobody knows. But look, if Dobbins is, maybe going to be sidelined or not 100%, we're going to see a lot more Drake. And that's still an iffy proposition because, he was the guy before Dobbins came back. He had one good game and then, hadn't really done much. It's hard to trust a running back in Baltimore because Lamar Jackson's always going to be the lead rusher there. But Kenyon Drake showed he still's got some burst. And again, starting running back on an NFL team, you want a piece of that. So Kenyon Drake is definitely worth picking up, especially if you need to fill in for running backs who are on bye this week. And now for maybe the third, fourth time, I want to talk about Wan'Dale Robinson. So I mentioned him on my Beat the Breakout early waiver wire pickups early in the season, and then again a couple weeks ago. Hopefully you stashed him. If you didn't, it's not too late. You could probably add him in most leagues. So he did score a touchdown, his first action since week 1, and 3 catches for 37 yards, which isn't a ton, but look, for the Giants, for a receiver, that's kind of a lot. He was second on the team in targets, and this is a guy who can make things happen with the ball in his hand. I can't guarantee high target volume or a ton of receptions, maybe not the highest floor, but this is a guy who I think will be very involved, and he doesn't need a ton of targets because he's explosive with the ball in his hands, and he does have touchdown upside. So given the state of that receiving core, we heard Kadarius Toney's on the trading block, if he even is eligible to play because he's always hurt or supposedly hurt. Kenny Golladay, I think we can forget about him. Look, Wan'Dale Robinson will be a major part of this passing game, so he's definitely worth adding. And then following up on that Randall Cobb injury, he's the slot guy. He's one of the trusted targets for Aaron Rodgers. With him gone probably a couple of weeks, Robert Tonyan, the tight end, is the guy who stepped up, which makes sense because he's working the middle of the field, a guy he's had connection with for a couple of years. So Robert Tonyan in week 6, 10 catches for 90 yards, 12 targets. I don't think anybody saw that coming, but again, he didn't see the Cobb injury coming, so that makes sense. Look, Tonyan is a guy who is interesting because tight end, as usual, is a wasteland once you get past the top couple of guys. And it's very interesting because week 7, they get to play Washington. We know Washington has a very suspect pass defense, so this is a great spot for him. So if you're in need of a tight end, or maybe your tight end is on bye in week 7, I would go ahead and add Tonyan immediately. Now, coming off that Sunday night game where you saw Dallas lose to Philadelphia, Michael Gallup really didn't do a lot. And Cooper Rush finally came back to earth, 3 interceptions. It looks like he's going to be replaced. But this is good for Michael Gallup because Dak Prescott should be back next week. It sounds like that's almost a foregone conclusion. And Dak being back helps Gallup. But also, this is the time to take a chance on Gallup. He looks fine. He just needs the offense to click. Well, they get to face Detroit, which is, I think, arguably the worst defense in the NFL. Maybe there's not even an argument there. All right, so I think Gallup, this is a good spot to stream him. Again, there's some high-powered offenses like Buffalo. Not the Rams. They're not high-powered anymore. The Vikings. Look, you're going to need to replace some receivers on bye next week. And, of course, there are always injuries. I think this is a good time to take a chance on Gallup. And he's a guy you might want to even hold the rest of the season if this pass offense comes alive. And then finally, look, quarterback, also really tough this year. There's a lot of guys you thought would be really nice late-round quarterback picks who were safe, and they're not. Matthew Stafford, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers all come to mind. All these safe veterans, Russell Wilson. So you need somebody with some upside. Well, I mentioned it at the top of the show, but Tua Tagovailoa is coming back. And let's remember what he did. It's been a couple of weeks. All you remember is the controversy with the concussions. But let's not forget that the first 3 weeks where he was starting, they were 3-0. They beat Buffalo. He had a 70% completion rate, 8 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. And he was looking really good, this whole offense. And you saw what happened just this week, even with Teddy Bridgewater for not even full game. You saw Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle go off. Teddy B was able to throw for over 300 yards in this offense. I think Tua is definitely worth adding anywhere that you need a quarterback, and he could be the long-term solution if you have those guys like Stafford or Russ. Those are the players I'm looking at for the waiver wire heading into week 7. Don't forget to join us Tuesday night for our live show. Talk about all the best waiver pickups and trades. And our week 7 playlist right here will give you everything you need to set that winning lineup.